Hi, I'm Shanna, and today I'm going to review the very first Discworld book, The Color of Magic. I will be reviewing every single one of these books, so buckle up your babies. We're going to Discworld. Before I get into it, hit the subscribe button so that you can see all of the Discworld stuff I'm going to be making, because it's going to be a lot. Now, this probably won't surprise you, but I love Discworld. I found it this year, and I have fallen completely in love. I have read 13 books now, and I am not even close to sick of it. If you're wondering what qualifies me to be making this video, you would be surprised how many people are qualified for things just because they did them. So, I'm just gonna do it. The Color of Magic. It's Octarine, by the way. So, The Color of Magic is the very first Discworld novel by Sir Terry Pratchett. This is a whopping 41 book series. So it's super daunting to get into and made all the more confusing because a lot of people say don't read this one. So where do you start? I already made a video about that. Check it out. I say start here. I am not a first book poo-pooer. As far as fantasy goes, this book is bite-sized at 228 pages, and it's super readable. Terry Pratchett is incredible at creating these hilarious, witty one-liners throughout his novels. And starting here, you really get to see that part of his writing. A lot of things about this book don't carry through to the rest of the series, and it definitely has a very different feel, but that part of his writing carries through. Honestly, I laugh out loud at least once a book. Another thing I can say that's different about this book from the rest of the series is, apart from his YA novels, this is the only one where anything that even resembles a chapter is involved. The rest of the books do not have chapters. So if that drives you crazy, I got over it really fast and it doesn't bother me at all. But I don't know you. Except for those of you that I do actually know. I do know you. It says here, Pratchett was quoted as saying that he just never got into the habit of chapters, later adding that I have to shove them in the putative YA books because my editor screams until I do. So, no chapters. I am going to try and stay as spoiler-free as possible, so don't worry. We begin just outside of Ankh-Morpork, which is the main city-state of the Discworld, or at least one of the major ones, and the one that we spend the most time in. Think of like a New York. It's a melting pot hub of all things cool. Basically, if it's in Ankh-Morpork, it will spread out to the rest of the Discworld. Ankh-Morpork is on fire. It is blazing in the background, and there are two adventurers just watching it burn. This is when we meet Rince Wind. He is covered in soot and looking like he had a really rough day. So he has a companion with him who you get into who this is, and he gets chatting with these guys, and that's kind of how the narrative is set up. So then we get the story from there on how we got to where we're at. So Rince Wind, he is our main character. He is one of the main characters of this entire series. He is a failed wizard. He's still a wizard, he just can't do any magic. But he has a pointy hat that says wizard on it, so that pretty much seals the fact that he's a wizard. The reason that he can't do magic, given by Rince Wind, is that his head is already full of one spell. And this spell is so big and so mean, it can't be used, and chases off all other magic that tries to enter his brain. So since he can't unload this spell, he can't get any new ones, and therefore he can do no magic. I mean, in later books, he still can't do any magic, so there's that. He's a coward. Self-proclaimed, proud of it, absolute coward. And unfortunately for him, he just can't seem to stay out of trouble, even though it's the only thing he desperately wants. The companion who is coming up with him is a little guy named Two Flower. He is a tourist. He's the first tourist. Nobody knows what tourism is, and he wanted to see Ankh-Morpork, so he came. He doesn't speak the language. He doesn't really know anything about it. Rince Wind is hired by Two Flower to be his guide around the city. And only because Rince Wind, despite being garbage at magic, is really good with languages, and he's the only one who can communicate with Two-Flower. So he agrees to be Two-Flower's guide with the intention of piecing it with the advance. Because Two-Flower is loaded. Where he comes from, gold is everywhere. Tons of gold. So without realizing it, he is making himself a target on the mean streets of Ankh-Morpork. So yeah, Rince Wind pieces it with the advance. But unfortunately, he is caught by the patrician, and he's basically told, you have to protect this guy, because if anything happens to him, it will start a war, and I will blame you. So Rince Wind is forced to be Two-Flower's guide. Two-Flower also has one of my favorite characters, which is a sapient pearwood luggage. It has 100 tiny little legs and teeth, and it is kind of a homicidal maniac. So that helps keep Rince Wind in line. There, that's the setup of the story. Rince Wind is Two-Flower's guide. We follow these two through a wild story with fire and trolls and monsters and dragons that only exist if you believe in them. And those are just a few of the stops along the way. We get to travel all the way to the edge of the Discworld. If you're a fan of Dungeons & Dragons, this one is extra fun because we, the reader, get to find out that the gods are actually playing their own Dungeons & Dragons style board game with these two as their players. At the end, this book segues right into the next novel called The Light Fantastic, and that is part of the reason that they are so often grouped together. Thematically, they belong together, and these are the two that have that different feel to them before the world was really established. So, as far as Discworld novels go, I can speak with the majority in saying that these aren't the best ones. They're not bad, but they're not the best ones, and they're not going to give you the scope of the Discworld that, I mean, you can only get by reading a ton of them. And like I've said, some people recommend skipping them entirely. Not me. No way. We get to see too much of the Discworld as it was being conceived. And we meet some of the greatest characters in the series here. We meet Rince Wind, we meet the luggage, we meet the librarian, even though he doesn't really become the librarian until the next novel. Honestly, I don't even really think it's fair to call them the weakest. They're just very, very different from what the series will become. The first two novels are very much a parody of the fantasy genre, and later on they become a lot more satire. The world, however, stops being a joke or a reflection of the fantasy genre, and it becomes its own world. So it starts feeling less like a parody because it grows into itself. The tone and the layout change a lot over the next few books. I didn't realize going to this series that Rince Wind and Two-Flower weren't going to be the characters that I stay with the entire time. We bounce around to other characters, so don't worry, we get to see them again. It's just the way that the series is formatted. It is actually really great. There are a ton of inconsistencies from these books going into the rest of the series. So Terry Pratchett actually addressed the inconsistencies in Discworld by saying, I have to read it. There are no inconsistencies in the Discworld books. Occasionally, however, there are alternate pasts. Whew. Good cover. He didn't actually set out to make the Discworld the monster work that it became. It wasn't until a few books in that he realized that people wanted a plot and they wanted consistencies. He's quoted in an interview saying, I suppose around the 5th or 6th Discworld book, I discovered the joy of plot. And you can feel that if you are reading through the series chronologically. So there it is, The Color of Magic. I think I've given you everything you need to know to get started and decide if you want to pick it up or not. I would give this one 4 stars because even though it's not perfect, it's fantastic. And I think that knowing what these books are and what they are not is really helpful when you're starting your journey through the Discworld. So thanks for watching. If you want to see more, please subscribe to my channel. I put out a new video every week. Also, hitting the like button is super helpful to me. I will see you next time. Bye! Sorry, if you can hear all the knocking, they're renovating next door, and there's no way to avoid it. So I'm sorry if you can hear that. Where's my steering wheel? Ah, dang it. I mean, you buy a steering wheel, and your 3-year-old just thinks he has a steering wheel now. Typical.